Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of November of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukrainian critical infrastructure, about energy infrastructure. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Russians carried out one of the biggest and most powerful attacks across Ukraine. The Russians were attacking energy facilities, objects of critical infrastructure. And the sources are saying that as a result of yesterday's attacks, the Russians managed to deal significant damage to Ukraine. And according to information we have today, we have power outages across the entire territory of the state. So once again, yesterday we didn't get almost anything about those strikes, just some statistics, numbers and maps and so on. But during the previous 48 hours, we received additional interesting videos and additional very interesting updates. So let's discuss this once again. The Russians, as we discussed, attacked Ukrainian energy infrastructure and energy facilities. For example, yesterday we received this video, and here, according to information we have, the video captured an impact near the Pridniprovskaya thermal power plant. As a result of the attack, the right bank part of Dnipropetrovsk was completely without power, according to local media. In addition, water supply outages began in several areas of the city. So this is the only video that confirms that the Russians indeed attacked yesterday the power plant in the area of the city of Dnipro. Furthermore, we received this video from the territory of the settlement by the name of Zaporizhzhia. Once again, probably 2 or 3 hours or 1 hour after Russians attacked this territory. And here, according to the author of this video, we can see another attack carried out by Russians on the energy infrastructural object of Ukraine. And that's it. So 2 power plants were damaged by Russia as a result of the previous day attack and nothing more. And today, during the previous 24 hours, more precisely, we received additional videos. For example, this video is coming from the area of the settlement by the name of Tripilya. So here we can see the consequences of attack on the Tripolska power station. So here we can see another smoke screen above the territory of the power plant. Most likely the power plant was damaged critically. So this is the situation. So this is the third power plant that was damaged by Russia. And today we got additional video and additional details about the attack on the territory of the Zaporizhzhia power station. So the previous video was made during the night period of time, and now we can see the consequences of Russian attack during the daylight. So as you can see, the power plant was damaged critically. Another smoke screen above the city, and most likely this is the reason why the Ukrainian authorities today announced that every single power plant would be turned off. A state-owned thermal power plant in Ukraine have been shut down, with no electricity generation currently taking place, according to the state company Centrenergo. As of now, nobody knows for sure, most likely when exactly this situation will be probably resolved, when all these issues in energy sectors will be resolved. Obviously, it will take several days, but the Russian sources are saying that the Minister of Defense and the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation are waiting when the situation will be fixed, and then most likely the Russians will repeat their attack on energy infrastructure, causing and dealing significant damage. So it's just the 9th of November of 2025, it's almost a month before the beginning of winter, and now we see that the situation is already critical. So most likely somewhere around 10th or 20th of December, the situation will be a disaster. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. As you can see, we received changes on the ground once again. So this is the situation by the end of the 9th of November of 2025, and as you can see, according to different mappers and according to different details and updates, the Russians improved their position significantly. So this is the map, for example, by the end of the 6th of November of 2025, and this is the moment when the Russians were about to secure the settlement and the Uspenovka fortified area. So this is the situation by the end of the 7th of November. The Russians, according to information we have, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over the Uspenovka fortified area. We discussed this video where we could see Russian soldiers raising flags in different parts of the settlement, so no doubts the village, the fortified territory, was captured. During the 8th of November, we haven't received almost anything, and we believed and I thought that the Russians were regrouping, but I was wrong. The Russians, without any any pause, continue offensive operation further and deeper inside of the Zaporizhzhia region, trying to shorten the distance with a city by the name of Gulay Polya. So today we have, as you can see, confirmed and unconfirmed changes. Let's first talk about unconfirmed changes. According to information we have, according to mainly pro-Russian sources and neutral mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation during the previous 24-48 hours, managed to improve their position significantly. First of all, and the most important, the Russians managed to capture this dense network of the fortifications. So as you can see, there are lots of strongholds that were captured by Russians. Furthermore, neutral mappers reported that the Russians moved even further in the western direction, and currently the clashes are taking place on the outskirts of the settlements of Novospinovska and Nova. So it seems that in coming days, these two villages would be captured by Russia. Furthermore, according to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation entered the eastern part of the settlement of Solodki. So we believe that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, this village would be secured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation as well. And the most important update of the Zaporizhzhia direction is coming also from this area, and we are talking about the settlement by the name of Rybna. Today, the Minister of Defense reported that the group of forces east managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Rybna. And almost at the same time, several pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement of Rybna were taking place. Here we can see how Russians were bombing and attacking the settlement with artillery, with aviation, how Russians were basically reducing the village to ruins. And in the final part of this video, we can see at least 4 episodes how Russians were raising their Russian flag in different parts of the settlement of Rybna. So all flags were geolocated. Of course, this is the first flag. These are the 3 flags that were raised on the territory of Rybna. And based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map, and now we see that the Russians left the limits of the village of Uspenovka, the limits of the Uspenovka fortified area, and the Russians began advancing. So now we can say that approximately the distance between the settlement of Gulay Polya and possible Russian positions in the area of Solodka is already less than 12 kilometers. So the Russians are advancing, and now it seems that during the next 2 months, I'm talking about November and December, Russians most likely will be able to establish and to secure these territories. And if it happens, this is going to be the beginning of the battle for the city of Gulay Polya, most likely without any chances for Ukrainians to hold their positions for a very long period of time. And if Ukraine loses the city of Gulay Polya, this is not going to be the lose of another settlement across Ukraine. This is going to be the complete collapse of the entire Zaporizhzhia defense. As for the northeastern flank of the Zaporizhzhia area, we can see additional changes as well. So first, let's take a look at this video. Here we can see the city of Pokrovsk along N15 road. And here we can see the only bridge that the Ukrainians used to have for their logistic. This bridge was destroyed probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, but just now we received this video where we can see the consequences in the situation. This is a very important video that shows us not just that the bridge was completely destroyed. So I would like to point your attention that the river of Volcha is a very complicated river. We're talking about its banks, and obviously it is very difficult to build any bridge in this area. And I believe that the river of Volcha limits the possibilities of Ukraine to create pontoon bridges across the river. So which means that the Russians understand that Ukrainians are limits and that the number of bridges, possible bridges, and places where these bridges can be built by Ukrainians are limited, which means that they can control the entire river of Volcha without any chances for Ukrainians to introduce additional forces to the south of the river. Furthermore, and due to the situation, due to all these problems, the Russians, without any resistance, continue advancing further, and basically the Russians are already along the river of Volcha. Today we got reports that the Russians began advancing in the area of the settlement by the name of Aristopol. So this is the situation by the end of the 7th of November. This is approximately the moment when Russians launched their major part of this offensive. By the end of the 8th of November, the Russians secured the settlement of Vovcha, and we had a video that confirmed this situation. Later, we got report that the Russians improved their positions further, and according to pro-Russian sources, these fields were captured. So now it seems that the Russians first are tasked to establish control over the settlement of Aristopol, but due to the fact that the settlement of Aristopol is a part of the Velikomikhailovka fortified area, this means that the Russians will not stop. They will continue offensive operation further. They will cross the river of Volcha, and they will take this settlement under complete control. The settlement of Velika Mikhailovka could be the second settlement along the river of Volcha on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha under control of Russian forces. The first village was the village of Ivanovka that was captured several weeks ago. And with these two villages, with the village of Ivanovka and with the village of Velika Mikhailovka, Russians most likely will continue offensive operation further in the northern direction and in the western direction with the purpose to capture the settlements of Gavrilovka, Mala Mikhailovka and the settlement of Prasyana. So this is the task of the armed force of the Russian Federation. With this attack, they will be able to get the railways, they will be able to get the main supply arteries and the main supply roads that in the end will open the Russians an operational space to move further in the north-western direction towards the city of Pavlograd, which is obviously the task of the armed force of the Russian Federation, because with the city of Pavlograd, Russians will be able to block the city of Dnipro and supply and support further in the direction of the city of Kharkiv. So it's like a puzzle. It's like let's say pictures and small pieces of the same of one picture. First the Zaporizhzhia direction before moving further in the direction of the city of Kharkiv, which obviously is becoming a part of possible plans for Russians for 2026. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk or the Mirnograd directions and cauldrons. You know that probably currently it's wrong to call this area as the Pokrovsk agglomeration or the cauldron of Pokrovsk, because the city of Pokrovsk, according to many mappers, most of the probably reliable sources, is already under complete Russian control without any chances for Ukrainians to restore control over the territory, despite the fact that most of Ukrainian sources are saying that the city of Pokrovsk is just one big huge gray zone. To tell the truth, I'm not sure about this, because we've received lots of videos of how Russians were moving across the city, but during the previous 3 or 4 weeks we have received just one video where we could see how the units of 425th separate storm platoon or campaign were regiment were establishing flags across the city, trying to show that everything is under control. So the Russians continue offensive, and the sources are saying that currently on the territory of the Mirnograd agglomeration there are around 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers that were blocked by Russians from every single side without any chances for evacuation. Ukrainians lost possibilities to escape this area, and the Russians are pressing the Ukrainians from every single side. Today we got report that Russians improved their positions on the eastern part of the city of Mirnograd by taking under control additional positions. Today we have geolocation that confirms Russian control of the most northern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. Here we can see Ukrainians that were hunting and destroying positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, the territory of the high-rise building area. They were attacking possible positions of Russians. This is a very important video that confirms Russian control over the most northern citadel of the city of Mirnograd. Furthermore, several pro-Russian sources reported that the last micro-districts and blocks of the city of Pokrovsk were secured by Russians, and this is a very important piece of news. So the situation is desperate, obviously. But as we discussed in the previous videos, we need to understand that the Russians are not tasked to destroy these cauldrons. They are not tasked to capture these territories completely, dealing significant losses to the armed forces of Ukraine. No, the Russians have a very clear task, a very clear, let's say, objectives. They need to encircle and to force Ukrainians to surrender. And the more Ukrainians surrender, the better picture the Russians will be able to show to the President of the United States of America and to the Western countries, and of course to the population of Ukraine itself. Thousands of soldiers encircled in Mirnograd could be probably the best picture for Putin and the worst picture ever for the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. So this is the situation. Anyway, the Ukrainians are still showing resistance. They are not planning to give up, but time will tell. Every single week may can worsen the situation for Ukrainians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Siversk. We have already discussed the situation. The Russians, according to information we have, managed to improve their position significantly to the south of the city of Siversk. They began clashes and fightings for this dense network of the fortifications. Most likely the Russians first of all are tasked to secure this area, and only then they will continue moving further in the western direction. They will try to improve their positions inside of the city limits, and here we can see how Russians were attacking positions of the armed armored forces of Ukraine. And here let's slow down the video to see the Russian soldiers. So this is the stronghold that the Russians are securing right now. And here we can see the moment when a Russian soldier, this is him, was, let's say, dropping grenade inside of the bunker of the armored forces of Ukraine. So this episode was geolocated right exactly at this point, and based on this video we came to conclusions that the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory. So Russians first of all will try to capture this dense network of the fortifications to the south and then to the east, and then from these positions the Russians will start their broad frontline attack, trying to answer and infiltrate inside of the city of Siversk from many directions. So it seems, and telling the truth, I'm not sure whether the Ukrainians are able to hold their positions, because the city of Siversk was probably one of the most powerful strongholds in 2022-2023, but due to the fact that the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the minimal level, it seems that currently it's not even a stronghold. Even the city of Liman is bigger than the city of Siversk. It's a very small town, and first of all I would like to point to attention that the main part and the most of the city of Siversk is located on the Russian side of the river of Bakhmutka, and this side is also split in two parts by railways. So you know that it's very complicated and very difficult to defend these territories. So most likely Ukrainians would be forced to fall back very, very soon. And something tells me that the battle for the city of Siversk will be finished probably by the end of 2025. You know that many battles across Ukraine, across the current line of combat contact, will be finished before end of 2025, and it's obviously. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of important updates. The first one is coming from the Yubileyny micro district. This is a very important video, and here we can see how Ukrainians managed to discover positions of Russians on the territory of high-rise building area, and then Ukrainians began attacking this building, this multi-storage building, with FPV drones. So these attacks took place on the Yubileyny micro district. This is the most western citadel of the city of Kupiansk, and this video confirms just one thing, that the citadel of Kupiansk, the western citadel of Kupiansk, was captured by Russians a long time ago. So we have no doubts that the Russians have very strong positions there. Furthermore, we had video from the territory of Kurilovka. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the village of Kurilovka is being cleared by Russians currently, and we can see that there are still Ukrainians, which means that there are still lots of job to do for Russians. So based on this video, we made small adjustments of the gray zone. So this is the situation by the end of the 8th November, and this is the situation by the end of the 9th of November. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that Ukrainians made a few more attempts to leave the eastern bank of the river Voskol towards the mainland, but Russians didn't allow the Ukrainians to do this. Ukrainians once again suffered losses, huge losses, according to the Minister of Defense. And here we can see many episodes, lots of episodes of how Russians were attacking the, let's say, pontoon bridges across the river Voskol, trying to disrupt and to destroy Ukrainian logistics. So, and as you can see, as a result of these attacks, the bridge was completely destroyed. So I would like to point your attention, I would like to remind you that 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff of the Armored Forces of the Russian Federation stated that 2 weeks ago there were around 5,500 Ukrainians on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration that were encircled. As for the city of Kupiansk, there were around 5,000 soldiers, and currently we start receiving reports that there are just 2,000 left on the territory of Pokrovsk. So I wonder how many soldiers left on the territory of the Kupiansk, which most likely something similar, around 2 or maybe 3,000 soldiers, not more. Most of them probably managed to escape the cauldron, but lots of them will stay there forever. And that's it for today. Military with Samurai channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.